Hello, and welcome to a presentation about how one government agency in the midst of one of the worst crises of our time really reimagined and rethought how they delivered benefits and services to the most at need citizens within their state. This is a story about really overcoming and using new methods and new approaches to overcome an absolute crisis. And how one really small but really mighty state has set a really inspirational path for, I think, leaders in both the public sector and the private sector. So COVID-19 was both a dual health and economic crisis. A year out, it's important to remember that in March and April last year, in those 6 weeks of March and the first 2 weeks of April, 30 million unemployment insurance claims were filed. It means 30 million people lost their jobs and really turned to the set of government programs to help them provide for themselves and their families in a time of very catastrophic need, right? Hospitals were starting to fill up. We were sending folks home. It was a really dark time. And it was really critical that we deliver these really important social benefit programs to citizens as quickly as possible. But we saw that this big surge in demand exacerbated a number of issues that already existed in government technology programs. Reliance on outdated approaches, reliance on outdated systems caused a number of major delays, outages, and outright failures in a number of states. And this really caused major delays and major pain in paying basic claims, providing basic services, and doing those fundamental things that are so important that government provides to its constituents. Today is really a story about how Rhode Island, in the midst of this absolute tsunami of demand, as my co-presenter has called it, really overcame this challenge by taking a more transformative approach, by having the courage to say, hey, the status quo isn't going to work, it's not going to let us meet these demands, and we need to look to the best practices and these approaches that exist right outside these walls, and did some things that government is not always known for, but we definitely see leading government organizations taking on. It's inventing new experiences, simplifying problems, using agile methods, moving with tremendous speed to deliver some of the most important benefits in an absolute time of crisis. So it's a pleasure to introduce Abby McQuaid, who's the Chief Innovation Officer for the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training, to talk about the experience Rhode Island has had in really rethinking and transforming their agency in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis.
Thanks, Casey. My name is Abby McQuaid, and I am Senior Advisor and Chief Innovation Officer here at the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. I am extremely glad to be joining today to talk about how Rhode Island has modernized our unemployment insurance system with the help of AWS. The Department of Labor and Training's mission is simple. We are here to help Rhode Islanders succeed in our economy. This can take many forms. We partner with businesses to provide demand-driven training programs like Back to Work Rhode Island, so that Rhode Islanders can get the skills they need for in-demand jobs. We enforce the labor laws of the state of Rhode Island to ensure that all of our workers are treated fairly. And we also inform the federal government, the press, and the public at large about the state of our economy by providing up-to-date labor market information. Another very important part of our mission, though, is taking care of Rhode Islanders when they find themselves out of work, and we do this through our unemployment insurance program. In the midst of a major health crisis that closed nearly the whole of our state and our state's economy, our unemployment program took on even greater significance for our state's workers. Across the country, unemployment insurance programs rely on very creaky, old-school technology. Rhode Island's was especially old school and creaky at the start of the pandemic. Our system was originally built in the 80s, and it relies on COBOL, which is a language that barely anyone even knows anymore. when we started to get flooded with unemployment insurance applications right at the start of the pandemic, our director at the time, Scott Jensen, actually had to reach out to former state employees, to retirees, to ask them to come back to help support the system because we just didn't have the resources. COVID-19 created an unemployment crisis at a magnitude that our decades-old system was not prepared to handle. It created a crisis that hadn't even been contemplated when the system was built and originally deployed. For example, before COVID, the highest number of unemployment claims that Rhode Island had ever received in a week was about 5,000, and we hit that in 1992. In the 52 weeks between March 9th, 2020, the day that Governor Raimondo declared a state of emergency, and March 7th, 2021, DLT has received over 900,007 claims for unemployment insurance. That's an average of over 17,000 claims a week. So given the number of the applications that we received in March of 2020, I conducted an economic analysis, which we call the SPIKE model, to evaluate the health of our unemployment insurance trust fund at the time. We wanted to see the probability that the fund would remain solvent throughout what we all hoped would be a short-term crisis, just through the spring. The model showed that Rhode Island had the potential to lose between 240 and 250,000 jobs. That's nearly half of our workforce, and it's a little under a quarter of our state's entire population. Something that's really important to note about this is that Rhode Island's economy is service-based, heavily service-based. Our total workforce is just over 500,000 people. It's about 550,000 people. And it includes tens of thousands of individuals who participate in that service or gig-based economy. They're self-employed or they perform services for companies as contractors. Those kinds of workers have never been eligible for traditional or regular unemployment insurance benefits. But the CARES Act, which was passed in March of 2020, created a program just for that population. And the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training also became responsible for administering that program in addition to regular unemployment insurance. So the creaky system that runs on COBOL included a claims application that had a direct connection into that COBOL system. And this is how the department learned who needed to file for benefits. The system was unstable on the best of days. It routinely would crash if too many people hooked into it, logged onto the DLT website, and wanted to check the status of their existing claim. So there was no way that this system was ever going to be able to handle the demand of the tens upon tens of thousands of applications from regular unemployed workers, those who receive a W-2, let alone accept any applications from contractors or independent workers for a program that hadn't even existed until just a couple weeks before. And maybe most importantly, our IT staff, and we are forever grateful for them and to them for working as hard as they did, for as many long hours as they did. There simply weren't enough of them at the time, and they didn't have the skill sets necessary to solution as fast and with the scalability that we needed at the start of the pandemic. And that's even with the help of the retirees that Director Jensen brought back. So we realized very early on that we had a huge problem that we needed to immediately develop a solve for. We reached out to the nonprofit Research Improving People's Lives, or RIPPLE, and AWS, and they came to us with smart, cloud-based, scalable solutions for our problem. Most important, though, I think, is that AWS made those solutions happen not just at all, but fast. AWS understood the goal and the urgency of the task ahead of us and helped Research Improving People's Lives to modify an existing survey application to turn it into a claims application so that we could start to take those PUA applications from the general public. in just 10 days, we had a new cloud-based claim system for the PUA program. This was not a commercial project. Government isn't usually known for innovating, but we had to develop a way to get an obsolete system essentially out of the way and then figure out how to get it to accept and process claims filed by non-traditional workers, people that the system never expected it would have to take information from. And we had to get it done really, really quickly in order to get Rhode Islanders the unemployment benefits that they needed to help pay for the basic necessities during the height of the pandemic. Simultaneously, while we were working with Ripple and AWS on that PUA application, we also realized that we had another problem: unemployed workers' weekly certifications. Certifications are sort of like a time card or a timesheet that an unemployed worker or somebody who's partially employed fills out every week to tell the department that they remained unemployed the prior week and that they still need benefits. They're still seeking help. So at the beginning of April of 2020, we had a certification system that, similar to our claims application system, hooked directly into that COBOL-based AS400 that the whole UI system was running on. At the time, that IVR could only support 74 concurrent connections via the phone and 375 concurrent connections through the web. So thinking back to that spike model, with potentially hundreds of thousands of Rhode Islanders needing to tell the department that they remained unemployed because our entire economy was shuttered, and with over 85% of those workers looking to tell us on a Sunday so that they could get paid on that following Monday, 450 concurrent connections was not going to cut it. So once again, we turned to AWS for a cloud-based solution. We not only met the standard set with our design and development of the PUA application, we also exceeded it. We worked with AWS ProServe to replace our legacy IVR and IWR systems with a custom system built using Amazon Connect as its base. That expanded our capacity by being able to take simultaneous calls and to allow simultaneous connections and certifications on the web up to 2,000 concurrent connections in a single second. So on that first day that we deployed the new IVR, we were able to take over 75,000 certifications. That is close to a 200% increase over what the previous high of the old system was able to take. So what that means is not just that the department was able to take more calls or accept more connections on the web, it also means that close to 200% more Rhode Island workers were going to receive their much needed benefits as soon as possible. We also added an Amazon Lex Q&A bot to our website as another immediate solution to take some of the strain off of our call center that was receiving thousands upon thousands of calls every single day. The chatbot allows the public to essentially ask easily answered questions, get their information instantly, and not need to call our call center. So it helps to divert some of those tens of thousands of calls that we're receiving every single day. It's funny. Conventional wisdom says that time is money. And private industry knows that time is money. Government, though, has traditionally followed a different approach. And there is totally something to be said for deliberation, debate, and a standardized approach to the way that we have to tackle, I would say, most of government's responsibilities. But at DLT, at the start of the pandemic, we realized that time is money wasn't just a phrase, because what the department took in time was costing Rhode Island's unemployed workers money. And it was money that they very desperately needed at a time when it was possibly the worst economic period in our state's history. So we knew we needed to think big. We knew we needed to act fast. And we had to transform the way we approached our claimants, just full stop, and their needs, while also responding to rapidly changing federal laws, guidance from the United States Department of Labor, responding to the public and the press. The transformation wasn't just technological, and it wasn't just sort of one-off solutions. What DLT did was we took the technological solutions and we used those changes to effectuate changes to our internal policies, our procedures, and even to our regulations.
Government and speed and government transformation aren't exactly things you hear together all the time, but I actually think this is really wrong. Government has always been a transformative and really important force in a lot of people's lives. Think about all the things it's invented, all the programs it has executed, and really at the scale it operates. It operates with a different set of constraints, but when understanding those constraints, right, one starts to get a picture of what transformation looks like at a scale and complexity that's almost hard to imagine. And as someone who's been both in the private sector and the public sector, say, that transformation work in government is every bit as complex, if not more so, than what we do in the private sector. We are seeing now this great trend of government agencies across the globe adopt these transformative practices that were pioneered in leading technology companies. Things like agile development, things like using user-centered design, really decomposing problems and solving them in a more agile fashion than the more traditional kind of waterfall, long planning cycle-based approaches. This is an incredibly important way to really approach, and the leading programs in this space are really adopting these citizen-centric, constituent-centric, beneficiary, or customer-centric approaches to driving transformation. Rhode Island is among these programs, and they've actually used the very same process that Amazon uses when designing new products and services. We call the working backwards process. And this is something that is used at Amazon and now increasingly by those organizations that work with Amazon, Amazon's customers, to really make sure that they are solving for the right people and solving the right thing for them. And it's really a set of questions and a process based around those questions to really make sure before we write any code, or before we design a new process, before we build something, that we really know who we're doing it for and why we're doing it, and understand what those problems are. And common across all organizations I've ever been a part of and worked with was, the real challenge of figuring out who that customer is. Why are we doing this? And what do they really need? And making sure there's a regimented and disciplined approach around doing that, right? So this isn't a process we use to figure out how to do what we already want to do. This is a process we use to make sure that we know what to actually do, and to make sure that we are doing it for the right people, and that we are going to deliver benefits quickly, right? And set us up to actually experiment and to learn, even when we're working at government scale type problem solving. Rhode Island used this method in the midst of their crisis response to get clarity on how they were going to rethink the applicant experience for the UI programs, right? Which was absolutely key to rethinking how those services got delivered, right? And how they would decrease the burden on, their overworked and too few workers within the program, which was absolutely key to making this program operate at scale.
So given the workload that the department faced every single day at the start of the pandemic, it might seem kind of like a weird thing that we decided to undertake a design thinking exercise, kind of a thought exercise, and really engage in that process. But I would argue that the exact opposite is true. I think that it was absolutely necessary. We had tens of thousands of people interacting with us or trying to interact with us every minute of every day, 7 days a week. And we know that thanks to the data that Amazon Connect can provide to us. We did not know how many calls we were missing until we actually went live with the Connect solution. We didn't know that we were receiving an average of 35,000 calls from Rhode Island workers every single day. We heard from so many of those people every day, like I said. And what they told us was that unemployment insurance, although they were happy it existed, was a black box to them. They'd provide their information to us through that application. Then they'd hear nothing, basically, for days or weeks, in some unfortunate cases, months, if it was taking a long time to get the information that the department needed to process an application. And then finally, once their claim was processed, they'd be sent an email that told them to start certifying within a particular window, with no information about what certification was, why it was important, how to actually engage with the department if they needed our help on anything else. We actually had one claimant who was so confused, instead of certifying, he actually filed a new claim every week, hoping to receive benefits. Eventually, he did get through to the call center, and we were able to straighten it out for him. But you know, you have to wonder, out of those 35,000 people who were trying to reach us, how many of them were in a similar circumstance. So as part of the working backwards process, we thought about basically how people engage with the goods and services that they basically order every day. And we created this idea of an unemployment insurance pizza tracker, where from start to finish, a person could apply, provide the department the information that they needed, get information from the department about what was happening with their claim, if it was taking longer to process, understand why it was taking longer to process, be provided with basic information about how unemployment insurance works, and be able to manage their payment settings without having to call the department and talk to one of our, quite frankly, overworked call center employees. And the pizza tracker has been several months in the making with a fantastic AWS ProServe team. And you know, we think that it's going to revolutionize the way that unemployment insurance is actually provided to the citizens, not just of Rhode Island, but we hope across the country. We've learned a lot in the past year, much more than can be shared in a half an hour. The biggest takeaway for me is that transformation in the public sector is possible, and transformation at speed is possible. I'd argue that in a post-COVID world, it's not just possible, it's necessary. And I'm very happy that Rhode Island DLT is an example of this, a positive example of this. Government organizations are sometimes scared of change and can be slow to adapt. Rebuilding systems can be very daunting. But it's even more of a risk to just keep doing what you're doing, especially in the face of, you know, a tsunami of need. Transformation is possible. It's vital to moving forward. And I think incorporating modern solutions is essential to driving government's mission.
So thank you to Abby, and thank you to everybody who both listened to this presentation today and helped put it together. I find this just one of the most inspirational stories that I have heard and had the pleasure to be a small part of in a long time. The work DLT did during to meet the surge in demand during a really, really dark time was just phenomenal. I really appreciate the hard work that they have done and that everyone in that organization did to deliver it. It was long days, long nights, work over the weekend. But they really succeeded in doing a set of things that were truly unprecedented. There's a couple of key lessons that I think apply to any leader in any organization, whether that be public sector or private sector moving forward. The key one is sometimes the status quo is the riskiest path to take. DLT had a choice, and the path of least resistance was to continue the status quo and to stay the course and to not move away from the approaches that had been used before, but quickly realized that that wasn't going to deliver the outcome they needed for their applicants, for the people who relied on these programs. It is never a good day if you are applying for unemployment insurance. And to have a really terrible experience while going through that process makes that even worse. So DLT's realization that they were going to have to break away from the status quo, break away from the technologies, break away from the technology approaches, and adopt some new thinking and start to transform the organization, despite doing that at what otherwise seems like a pretty inopportune time, was a very brave choice, but also demonstrates how other organizations can and should start thinking about their transformations. Right? The status quo can be the riskiest choice. Okay. How do you think about then taking those first steps in a transformation journey? Every organization we've seen do this really effectively really focuses on one thing, and that's delivering really compelling services, delivering benefits to constituents, to citizens, to customers, whoever the customer is for their services. And as we've seen government programs and more private sector organizations start to transform themselves, transforming around this notion of delivering benefits, delivering on behalf of the people who are their customers, and making sure that you actually have a process for understanding what their pain points are, what they need, who they are, what they're going through, and how you can help is incredibly important. It's really the keystone of any organizational transformation journey. AWS and Rhode Island have used Amazon's working backwards process to great effect to really kind of focus in on what are those most compelling, what are the things we need to solve, and to make sure we actually know what they are. A really important step in a transformation journey, which ties right into, I think, our last point here, which is investing in effective digital services allows for a better experience for the applicant, for the person using a digital service, for interacting in a digital space with a program or a company, while also really removing workload from the employees behind the scenes who are keeping the program running, who are processing claims, right? Adjudicating benefits, doing all the things that happen in an organization to really to make it run. We're never going to be in an environment where we have a surplus of people within these organizations. So we really need to remove that undifferentiated work, that things that could be done by, that work that they are doing because we automated poorly, not even the work that we could automate it, to find more and more work that could have been automated but was automated poorly. Are really just creating a bigger workload for them. We don't have enough of them. They're invaluable. We're not getting more. Let's remove that really onerous work and deliver a really great applicant experience and make our organization effective, both in delivering services and a joyous and much more efficient place to work, where people can focus on the things that make them excited about work, which is delivering value, as opposed to processing paper, manual tasks that should have gotten automated. Introducing these digital services, which Rhode Island shows how you can do it in a crisis. Right? It's something that organizations should be really asking themselves as part of a resiliency strategy moving forward. Do I have effective digital services in place? It's absolutely key to scaling organizations and really getting prepared for what we know will be, the next major surge in claims in usage. We don't know what that'll come or when that will come or what will drive it, but it will come. So let's be prepared, and in the meantime, let's deliver really, really effective and really compelling experiences for those who use our services. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much. Thank you to Abby. Thank you to everyone at DLT. Thank you to everyone at AWS who worked on this project. And just thank you for the audience for engaging today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Feel free to get in touch with us, and please do take the survey. Thank you.